Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the quantum research information session. So can everybody see my screen, by the way? Just let me know if the screen cuts out or anything, and I'll fix that. So my name is Zara Yu. I'm an incoming junior at MIT studying physics and math. And yeah, welcome to the session. So all questions can be held till the end. So like if you have a question, just either type it in chat or you could just like wait until the end to tell me and then I'll answer. I'll have like a little question session at the end. Okay, so the outline of this talk will be as follows. The first point is why is research important? Like specifically, why is doing research in high school important? And why is doing research in like quantum important? And I'll also talk about how we do research. And then also guys, make sure you're muted by the way.
我看看你说
Yeah. Okay, then the second point will be how we present our research. So I'll just talk about the different ways that people in academia and industry like release their research results to other people. Then the next point will be my personal experience in research through high school and then after coming to MIT. And I'll also talk a little bit about the pipeline from doing research in high school to doing research in college. And then the final point will just be talking about like registration procedures for current research competitions that I'm familiar with. And I'll try to like describe this as best I can based on my experiences. Okay, so like I said, the first point that I want to talk about is why is research important? So a common philosophy that people hear in life is that the best way to learn something is by doing. So in high school, when you take classes, you learn by going to lectures and doing homework and taking tests. But oftentimes, at least for me personally, the information kind of doesn't really stay in my brain for too long. And then like when I leave high school, a lot of the stuff I learned in those classes is like either not really useful to me or I just forget about it. But something I experienced while I did research, like even in high school, is that I learned a lot more from doing research, than from just taking classes about the subject. Because what you get to do is you get to do like self-exploration and you get to just like explore the topics that you really want to explore. And then by doing that, obviously you're doing something you're interested in, so it helps you learn more. And you also get to do stuff just outside of going to class and listening to a teacher talk. You get to read about like current developments, which leads to the next point. Research really helps you expand your horizons to the newest technological and scientific developments in the world. So in class, a lot of the stuff you learn about is just fundamentals and basics. And it's like a good framework, but what research really teaches you is what is really going on in the world currently. And it can help you just learn about the newest topics, the newest things that are happening. And that's always exciting. So another reason why research is important is you can do something that hasn't been done before. Like essentially the point of research is you want to explore topics and questions that haven't been answered yet. So in that way, research is very creative. It's not just like you follow a step-by-step process and you have an answer. There really is no answer, and that's something pretty exciting, I think. So you get to just explore the mysteries of the universe and stuff. So that's pretty interesting. And then finally, not many people are able to do research, especially in high school. So just being able to do it is a huge scientific achievement in itself. Okay, then the next thing I want to talk about is why is doing research in high school specifically important? Why not wait until like college or even when you have a career? Why should we start doing it now? Well, the first thing is that it's an excellent extracurricular activity, and I'll tell you why. The first point is it can help with exploring careers in industry and academia. So it's pretty straightforward why it would help you with like exploring a career in academia, since academia itself is essentially just doing research. But currently in industry, a lot of firms and businesses or just different areas of industry have started to open up like research departments. For example, in like finance, there's a lot of research or like kind of jobs essentially. And also in like Silicon Valley, those like tech firms, they're working on like researching new developments. So of course, doing research in high school would already help with building those skills and seeing if you're interested in that kind of career. Another good thing about doing research in high school is it'll help you learn important collaboration and teamwork skills. A lot of the time in high school, many activities that you do are just by yourself. You're like, for example, doing competitions, that's a like a self kind of activity. But the important thing about research is actually learning how to collaborate with others. For example, when you're doing research, you have a mentor, you have a team, like a group that you work with. And something really important that people should learn about is being able to like communicate their work to other people, learning how to like take ideas from other people and discuss topics. That's a pretty important part of doing research, and it's an important skill to build, especially, for example, when you go to college and then you end up getting a job somewhere. A lot of those things you need to be very collaborative and have good teamwork skills. So it's good to start developing that early. Another thing is research experience is very useful for the college admissions process. If you put like you did a research project in high school, colleges will like if you put that on your resume, and it's always an upside in doing research. And then finally, research is a very enjoyable thing to do, especially if you're working on a topic that you're really passionate about. It could be anything like something in bioengineering or like chemistry or physics. And in general, if you just find something that you're really interested in doing, then research can be very fun. Okay, so now I want to talk about specifically the importance of doing research in quantum physics. Currently, quantum computing represents a new era of science and technology, and that's called the quantum revolution. And the reason why is because quantum computing, it helps improve efficiency in computing. So you're able to process data sets much faster, you can do computation much faster. So that's why it's useful for optimization problems and machine learning and like applications in a lot of other industries. So for example, people use it for financial modeling, developing drugs in the medical industry. So it's useful for a lot of different things. And currently, more than $40 billion like worldwide has been invested into developing quantum technology. And in the US specifically, the National Quantum Initiative Act authorized $1.2 billion in funding for quantum computing research and development over the next 5 years. So you can see that right now it's a very like hot field. And if this is something you're interested in, then it's like very good to get involved in research early on. Then another important part about quantum research is that it provides an excellent platform for educating students and just working on research. So something good about quantum physics is that it's pretty accessible to those with and without a very strong math background. So if you're not like super strong math wise, it's okay because quantum like physics is pretty easy to pick up without needing like a very strong math background beforehand. So it's something you can just pick up along the way. Another thing is that it allows students to learn computer science techniques in an applied manner. So for example, you can learn about like data analysis and like machine learning techniques, and you can just use like physics data sets to do that. So you can learn these computer science techniques and apply them to something that's actually real instead of just learning it theoretically. Then another thing is you can learn about mathematical modeling and numerical simulation. So this kind of ties into the previous point. Like if you have data sets in quantum physics, then you can just use that to practice modeling skills and simulation skills. And then finally, this provides an opportunity to practice scientific communication skills, and I'll talk about that more in the next slide. So now I want to talk about presenting research. So once you have scientific results, there are a lot of different ways to present these results. So the first way is through a conference abstract, and those are essentially like a 1/2 to 1 page and sometimes 2 page description of your research, essentially. Then you have a seminar or a conference presentation. Then you have conference proceedings, which is essentially a compilation of like all the work that is presented at a conference. So like each person can submit some sort of report and it gets like combined into this like book, which is like a conference proceeding. But those are not as common anymore, but that's still an option. Then another thing is a scientific report or like a poster. Then you have preprints, which are essentially a report style that's put on an open access archive. And the archives, they're not peer reviewed, but when you do submit it, they check for scholarly value. So if it seems like scientifically sound, then it gets put on the archive. So that's what that's called. And many researchers put their work on the archive before they publish. So the next point is just a publication, and this is like a peer-reviewed journal and stuff like that. And then you have book chapters. So similarly, you can also like put your paper in a book chapter instead. And then finally, the main thing I'll talk about is research competitions, since this is like the most applicable to high school students. So the research competitions that I'm going to be talking about today are the ones that I have the most experience with, and I'll be talking about 3. So the first one is TNJSF, which is the Terra North Jersey STEM Fair. And it's basically for students in grades 9 to 12 that are located in the following New Jersey counties, like basically just northern New Jersey. And if you don't live in these counties, then what you have to do is, so ISEF is the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, and to participate in ISEF, you have to participate in a society affiliated fair. So like for example, I participated in TNJSF. But if you don't live in these counties, what you have to do is you have to go to the ISEF website and they have like a list of all their society affiliated fairs, and you can just search for the one that you like live in the region of. And then finally, the last competition I'll talk about is STS, or Regeneron Science Talent Search. And that's for students that are in like their senior year of high school in the US. So essentially for TNJSF, what you do is you submit like posters and like a presentation style thing. For ISEF, it's something similar. You do like a poster presentation kind of thing. But for STS, you have to submit like a report, a poster, and a presentation style. So I'll talk more about that at the end when I talk about like registration for these research competitions, but that's just an overview. So now I want to talk about why we're interested in quantum physics and machine learning or artificial intelligence in research. So you can see in the ISEF 2024 top awards, I looked through all the projects that won like the top awards, and there are a few that rely on like quantum physics and machine learning. So the first one here is symmetry, fixed points, and quantum billiards, a confluence of ideas. So this was essentially like a mathematics project that had applications in quantum computing and information. Then another one here is called a novel hadronization model, explaining charm quark hadronization in different collision systems through yet unobserved excited states and cluster volume dependence. And this was essentially like a particle physics project. Then we have integrated in silico and in vitro experimental strategies for the application of carbon quantum dots in Alzheimer's research. So you can see that you don't even have to just do like pure quantum physics research. You can also apply it to the medical field. Then the next one is measuring quantum entanglement entropy in Gaussian boson sampling. And this is like another quantum computing and information project. And then the last one is FISQ, a few-shot interpretable and self-supervised quantum machine learning approach to automated real-time prediction over multiple domains. And this is quantum machine learning. Yeah, so if you're interested in these projects, you can like look them up online, and I think their posters should be available. So you can see how quantum physics and machine learning are represented in these research competitions. And then I found a few more. So this is for Regeneron STS from last year. So from the 2024 finalists, which is like the top 40, there was one project here called Analyzing the Effect of Mid-Circuit Measurement on Spectator Qubits. So it's like error correction in quantum computers. And then from the top 300 list, we have a quantum optimization algorithm to efficiently route public transportation in cities. We also have hybrid quantum classical machine learning for dementia detection. So it's another application of like quantum machine learning in the medical industry. Then we have novel photoluminescence recovery method of porous silicon quantum dots for bioimaging application. So you can apply quantum physics also to bioengineering. And then the last one is resolving the constraints imposed by chiral effective field theory and perturbative quantum chromodynamics on the neutron star equation of state. So this is more of like a theoretical physics research project. But yeah, you can see how quantum physics and ML are pretty significant in research, and they obviously do well in research competitions. So the next part I'll talk about is my own personal experience um, from doing research in high school and how that's helped me in college. So the first project that I had in my junior year was called Analyzing SARS-CoV-2 Patient Data Using Quantum Supervised Machine Learning. So essentially, I used like quantum machine learning techniques to go through COVID-19 patient data to determine like if you had a new data set, do these people have like COVID or not? And that year I submitted it to NJRSF, which is essentially TNJSF, but they renamed it because they got a new sponsor. But it's the same exact competition. But in that year, I got the USAID Science Champion Award, and that's the United States Agency of International Development Award. So it was like a special award. Then my senior year, I did the project Many Body Quantum State Control in the presence of environmental noise. And I submitted it to NJRSF, and I got second place in the physics and astronomy category. And I submitted it to Regeneron STS, and I got a semifinalist. So that's like top 300. So then from this experience, when I entered MIT, I found a new project to work on called Quantum Simulation in Waveguide QED Architecture. And this actually ended up connecting to the project that I did in high school. So I was able to connect those projects. And I gave a presentation on that at the 72nd RIKEN Quantum Computing Seminar as an invited speaker. And RIKEN is essentially like an academic institution in Japan. So from my experience, I learned some tips, tricks, and general philosophy about research that I wanted to share with you guys here. So the first thing that I want to talk about is time management. When you're doing research, you have to basically treat it like an intense extracurricular activity. Like it's not just something you work on in your spare time, you have to work on it constantly. Like something that I used to do when I first started my research is maybe I would work on it like a few times a week. And it was pretty slow in the beginning since obviously I was very new to research and I wasn't exactly sure how to even approach it. But something I ended up learning is that you kind of have to work on it like every day, even if it's just a little bit, but you always have to constantly be thinking about your project and not to let it like stall in a way. So it's just something you always have to be working on. Another thing that's important to know is that research is a long-term commitment. So in academia, you have research projects that can take months to years. Now, obviously, since you guys are in high school, you won't be working on projects that will take like years to complete. It'll be more like the order of a months to a year. But it's just important to note that you won't be getting results like right away, like a week after you start. Like you have to understand that these projects can take time. There's no definite answer, like I said. So you have to just keep thinking about it and keep working at it until you have like results that you're able to share. And also, something important to know is that even if the work isn't like completely finished, you can always like if you find something interesting, that's also like results to share. So it doesn't always have to be like 100% done. And you can also, when you're doing research, you'll end up branching off, thinking of new ideas. So like oftentimes these projects will just branch off to new projects. So like it's always just it just keeps going essentially. Then another thing, which is I guess like pretty straightforward, is just using your time effectively. So in research, since I said like there's no correct answer that's known yet, so if you get stuck, um, you can't expect that if you just keep like working at it, you'll get to an answer because that's not always true. Like you just might not be working at it the right way, or you might not even be looking at the correct thing. So if you get stuck, the best thing to do is just like don't waste time. Like if you've already been working at it for a while and like on a problem you're stuck with, it's best to just either talk to your team members, talk to your mentor, read some like other papers, work on some other things in the project because you never know if you're just hitting a dead end. So like there might not always be light at the end of your tunnel. So that's just something to know is using your time effectively, especially in high school. When if, for example, if you want to apply for research competitions, you don't want to hit like a dead end and then just stay there. You want to keep working on other things so you know that you're being efficient. Okay, then another thing I want to talk about is work methodology. So essentially, when you're doing research, something important to know is learning how to pick up information in a relatively short amount of time. For example, if you're starting a project on like quantum computing, but you've only taken like AP Physics C or something, that seems like, oh, I have to pick up all that information now, but I need to start my project. So, but you really don't have to do that. Like, you just have to figure out exactly what topics you need to know and then just learn that. Like you don't need to go through the whole field of physics and learn everything there is to know for the project you're working on. Like you have to consider it like on a case by case basis. Like what do I really need to know to like start working on this essentially. So that's some advice I would give to you. Another thing is looking at different sources to understand concepts. So essentially what I mean is like when you're learning the information that you need, like any background or something for your project, something good to do is looking at like multiple articles, multiple authors, different types of like things like papers, posters, abstracts. Just looking at many different kinds of sources to learn a concept because when like authors write articles, they're doing it from their own perspective. So whatever they write down might not be complete or even correct. So it's always good to get like multiple angles on a certain subject so you really get the full picture of what you're doing. Okay, then the another thing to know is just to like ask questions about everything. Like an important part about research is being creative. Like you need to be curious about things so that you can like get a new angle about something, come up with a new method to do something. Because research is about innovation essentially. Like you have to be like a very good critical thinker so that you can find the method that's correct or be looking at even the correct thing, looking at the correct problem. So that's like something to know. And then finally, something to do when you're doing research is making sure you're like talking to your peers, talking to mentors, talking to your collaborators, because you always want to get like a second opinion on something, a third, fourth. Like it's always good to just have more eyes on a problem, because their opinion or their like perspective on things could actually like help you a lot in advancing your project. So that's something to know. Okay, so then the next thing I want to talk about is presenting your results, like how to better do that. The most important thing I would say is learning how to use LaTeX. So LaTeX is a typesetting system that a lot of people use to prepare documents. like especially when you're writing papers, and you can even write presentations using LaTeX. But essentially, like if you look at a lot of like papers online, like pretty much all of them are probably just written in LaTeX. Like it's really useful for also sharing documents with others and also just writing mathematical expressions, adding figures, and like formatting stuff. So like that's pretty important to know for when you're presenting your results. Then another thing is learning how to use some sort of like Python, Mathematica, MATLAB, those kinds of things for generating figures. So you should just learn how to code essentially so that you can like do data analysis and then create plots and diagrams and stuff like that using like one of these systems. Then another thing is Microsoft PowerPoint is really useful for doing scientific presentations, posters, seminars, and lectures, like any kind of presentation, I guess. I would always just use Microsoft PowerPoint. Like especially for research competitions, a lot of them now, they ask for digital presentations, so it's always good to just use PowerPoint. And also, when you're doing these kinds of presentations, you always have to make sure your PPT is very organized, it looks nice and clean, and you don't want to make it look too like messy or anything, essentially. Okay. Then another tip I have in is regards to like organization. So one thing that's really, really important to know is making sure to preserve like any data, manuscript versions, or notes that you have so that you'll always be able to find it. Like a problem that a lot of people have is they'll just lose their like data sets because they just like label it something super random and then it's just gone. Or like they won't keep track of versions of their like reports and stuff. So then if you don't have like an old version, then like you can never refer back to it and it's just gone. So it's always good to just make sure you keep all of those in like a folder or something. Just make sure you label it nicely so that you'll always be able to find it. Um, Another thing, the final thing, is making sure that you're keeping track of useful references. Because in the future, for example, if you're writing up a report or you're writing a presentation, you can use those to cite in like your presentation. So essentially, like for example, if you find a figure or like some like text in like a paper that you think is very useful and you want to include it, you have to make sure you cite those in your research presentation papers because that could be like academic dishonesty. And for example, if you submit that to like competitions, you could get disqualified. So it's always good to make sure you're following all the regulations and the guidelines that they have for like academic honesty. Okay, so then I want to talk about the path from doing like quantum computing research in high school to specifically MIT, because that's just what I'm most familiar with. So at MIT, we have an academic department and research organization called RLE, and this is the Research Laboratory of Electronics at MIT. So they do a lot of like quantum computing and quantum information research there. For example, we have the MIT Harvard Center for Ultra Cold Atoms. So you have different subdivisions of that where they do quantum engineering, quantum research. And for example, there are two really great professors that work in this department. The one on the left here is called Wolfgang Ketterle, and he's actually a Nobel Prize winner. And the one on the right is Isaac Chuang. So he's like the author of this very famous quantum computation textbook that's pretty much set the standard for quantum computation. And they do some really interesting work here. Then there's another department called the Nanoscale Materials, Devices, and Systems. And they have like quantum nanostructures, quantum photonics. So we have these two professors, Dirk England and Carl Berggren, that do very interesting work there. And then finally, this is the quantum computation and communication division. So, for example, they have quantum information, engineering quantum systems, and there are two professors here, Seth Lloyd and Will Oliver, that are the heads of these essentially. So, from doing research at during high school, I was able to come into MIT and find a UROP, or that's basically a research project at MIT pretty quickly because when you go into MIT and you apply for a research project, or like you email a professor and ask them if you could work on research with them. What you do is you would send them like a resume, what you're interested in. And if you already do have prior experience, I find that it's a lot easier because they know that you're capable of working on research and they know what you've worked on before, so they know how much knowledge you have. So it's always good. Just doing research in high school definitely helps with getting a project later on in college, I'd say. So then, really quickly, I'll just talk about the theoretical side of quantum computation research at MIT, since that other side was more about experimental research. So MIT has a professor called Peter Shor, and he's very famous in the quantum information field for discovering Shor's algorithm, which is essentially a quantum algorithm that finds the prime factors of an integer. And he found that his algorithm was much faster than like other classical algorithms that had been developed at the time. So this showed basically how there was a quantum supremacy essentially. And then here's some three other professors at MIT that do theoretical quantum computation. We have Edward Farhi on the left, Soonwon Choi in the middle, and Aram Harrow on the right. So they all work on like quantum algorithms and just like theoretical quantum information projects. Okay, so then the last thing that I want to talk about is research competition registration deadlines and some like registration procedure details. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is TNJSF. So that was the Terra North Jersey STEM Fair. And the dates that are here are the dates for this year. So like the 2024-2025 cycle. So the registration opened May 31st and the pre-certification deadline is December 1st. So this is essentially filling out some forms, I believe. And then the actual official like application deadline is February 4th of 2025. And then after you submit your application, phase one judging is finished February 23rd. So I'll talk more about like exactly what that means in a few slides, but I'm just giving you the dates here. Then March 3rd is when the abstract is due. So that's like the 1/2 of a page to 1 page like description. Then March 10th is when your presentation is due. So I believe it's just like a PPT or it might be a poster, but that's when that's due. And then the judging occurs March 22nd and March 23rd. So that's the category judging and the special awards judging. Okay, so then, like I said, to participate in ISEF, you have to participate in one of the society affiliated fairs. So, for example, if you won the ISEF grand prize at TNJSF, then what happens is 12 days after you find out announced, like this is when the deadline is, you have to submit the finalist questionnaire. And this slide has the 2024 dates, by the way, because I couldn't find the 2025 ones. I don't think they've been released yet. So this just gives you a general idea, though, of what your timeline would look like. So, yeah, 12 days after you find that out, you have to submit a finalist questionnaire. Then sometime in the middle of April, you have to submit like a new version of your abstract, so like an improved version. Then like by the end of April, you have to submit your presentation, like a PPT and stuff like that. Then May 1st, or just like the beginning of May sometime, they do phone and video interviews and they do like safety inspections based on the forms that you submitted for the questionnaire. And then ISEF occurs like in the middle of May. So it's like a week in the middle of May. Okay, and then we have STS. So STS, the dates for this cycle, 2024 to 2025, are registration open June 1st and the application is due November 7th. Then January 9th in 2025, they'll announce the top 300 scholars, so that's like semi-finalists. And then January 23rd, they announce the top 40 finalists. Then like sometime in the beginning of March, March 6th to 12th here, they do the finals week where March 9th is the public project exhibition and March 11th is the award ceremony. That's like what the timeline for STS looks like. Okay, so now I'll talk about the TNJSF registration procedure specifically. If you do end up participating in a different society affiliated fair, I'm not exactly sure what the procedure is like there, so you'd have to do your own research. But this was just based on my experience. So phase one judging essentially determines which projects advance to the exhibition phase. So like the presentation phase of the fair. So what they base the judging on is one, the technical quality of the project, two, the use of available resources, and three, the amount of effort expended on the project by the student. And they do the evaluation just based on a form that's called the TNJSF research plan form. So you can find it on their actual website. But yeah, the TNJSF research plan form asks for one, a research rationale and some background on the topics. We just put like in general what the background of the topic is, why you're doing the project, what your project is actually about. So you have to write that all in this form. Then you have to put your research questions, your hypotheses, and your engineering goals. Then three, you would have to put your procedures and experimental design. So for example, if you're doing some sort of like data science project, you would put how you're collecting your data. And then finally, you also have to put a data analysis procedures. So these are like the most important parts of the form, essentially. There's also some parts about like safety concerns if you're doing some sort of like bio project, biochem project. But these are the main parts of the form. Okay, so then after the phase one judging, you have category judging, which is like a month later, maybe. So for category judging, after the phase one judging, each project gets put into a category and you can find all of them online. But for each category, you have like a minimum of 3 judges assigned to each project. And then each judge like interviews one at a time. So you're not going to get interviewed by like 2 judges or something. So then after they do the judging, they'll assign first place, second place, and third place. They could assign multiple people to first place, multiple people to second, multiple to third, just depending on like what they think about the quality of the projects. Or like sometimes they won't assign any first place or something like that. So that's how category judging goes. Then the day after category judging, they do special awards judging. So for that, they have a minimum of 2 judges for each project, and the judges can judge in groups of up to 3. And then ISEF judging occurs during the special awards judging. So it falls under like the category of special awards. And essentially, they take all the projects that placed first in each of the categories during category judging, and they like go through all of them. And they pick 12 finalists out of those, like all the people that placed first. And in like the 12 finalists, they can only pick a maximum of 2 team projects that can advance to ISEF judging. And then finally, the 12 finalists will have another judging session. And after that, the ISEF like grand prize winners are chosen with at least one winner from the junior division. So they have to pick one person, at least like one from 9th and 10th grade. And then they can have like a team project be chosen for ISEF. So only one can be chosen. So that's how TNJSF works. Then if you do make it, like you get the ISEF grand prize, how the ISEF registration procedure works is first you have a virtual display that you have to submit. So this consists of the finalist questionnaire, which is like you submit your abstract and a bunch of forms. Then you have the project presentation, and then you have a single page project summary, and then a project video. And then finally you have to submit like a physical display. So you do like a poster board essentially. Okay, then finally I'll just talk about STS registration. So the main part of STS registration is submitting a research report. So it has to be 20 pages or less and includes a title page, an abstract, and a bibliography. So the report is essentially just a big paper about your research project and like all the work you did. Then another part of the registration is you have to submit recommendation letters. So one of them is an educator recommendation. So you have to ask a high school teacher, like preferably one in a science, engineering, or math class, to submit a recommendation for you. Another one's a project recommendation, which is given by the person that's most familiar with the research and work you do on a daily basis. So this would probably just be your mentor. And then finally, your counselor has to submit a high school report. So those are the three recommendation letters that you need. And then you also have to submit application prompts. So essentially, they'll ask you a bunch of questions on the portal, like about you, your research projects that you did before, your activities, and how you spend your time. I don't remember what the exact questions were, but this just gives you a general idea. And then there's some like short essay questions as well. And finally, the optional part is test scores. So you can submit like AP scores, I think, and SAT scores and stuff like that. But that's like an optional part. So that's how STS registration goes. Okay, so then now you guys can ask questions in the chat. I also can't read Chinese, so it would be great if you guys could just like ask questions in English because I can't read it otherwise. But yeah, if there's any questions, now's the time to ask. You can also like say a question out loud if you want. Okay, so my process for getting started with research in quantum physics was essentially in junior year, I reached out to like a professor in a university near me, and I just asked them like if they could advise me generally on a project. So that's how I started my research with like COVID-19 analysis in quantum machine learning. So essentially, like I met with my advisor like maybe once a week, and then outside of that, I would just work on it on my own. And that's basically how I got started. And then through that, they just recommended what I should learn in respect to like quantum physics or like and like specifically what I was working on. So they like helped find resources for me to look at. And that's pretty much how I got started. Okay, so sorry, but the recording for this won't be shared publicly. But if you have any questions, okay, so my email here is at the end. So if you have any questions, you can like send me an email and then I can just let you know. And I'll send you like a response as quick as possible. But yeah, so the next question is how do you find mentors or labs in universities and how do you reach out? So the experience that I had and that a lot of other people have is that you basically just cold email, which essentially means you like send just an email with like your name, your school, your resume, your interest, and like you can just say like I'm very interested in working in a group, and you just try to reach out to as many people as possible, um, and then just hope that someone responds. That's pretty much what happens to a lot of people who work on research in high school. Okay. With TNJSF, where there's judges and it's kind of subjective, are there anything specifically that they look for? Um, Honestly, like I don't exactly know how the judging goes because obviously online they say that they try to be as like fair as possible and judge everyone very equally. So I guess like they're probably just looking for something that seems like very, I don't know if that's the right word, but they're probably just looking for something that seems very like interesting, something that seems kind of difficult. Like obviously if you win some of the like top prizes in these competitions, then they think that your research was very like interesting and probably like very difficult to do and you show a lot of promise as like a researcher essentially. Like that's what they're looking for the top prizes is that you seem like you have a lot of potential as a researcher. Um, okay, so someone asked for TNJSF, you don't need to write a paper. Yeah, you don't need to write one. The only thing you have to do is fill out like the research form, like describing what you're actually doing, and then you have to make a presentation. When I did it, it was during COVID, so we just did like online presentations on Zoom and stuff. But I think nowadays either they do a poster board or you just also have to make a PPT, but you present it like in person. But I'm not exactly sure. Okay. Someone asked, what classes do you need to finish, or what is the preliminary science background that you need before you can start research project? It really depends what research project you're working on. Like, for example, if you're working on quantum physics, you don't need to know like biology or chemistry to like that much of an extent. But like I would say like just knowing like maybe up to AP of like whatever science you want to do is fine, or just even like honors and then filling in the gaps depending on what you're actually like researching. Can I take a look at previous slides about TJ-NSF? Well, yeah, just send me an email and I can like copy you the specific slides um after the seminar is over. Okay, another person asked, does it matter that you have to find mentors in famous universities or any universities are finding college application getting work? Yeah, you definitely don't need to find mentors in a famous university. Like you don't have to find a mentor in T5. It's like just fine to do one in any college essentially. As long as you're actually like really working hard and you manage to like get an output out of it. It really does not matter what college you like work at for sure. Like you can definitely do it at any college. How much would you say your research influenced your college applications and admissions? And is it common for people to start in later years of high school? Yeah, it's definitely, I think my research probably helped my college applications since what I wanted to study in college was physics and like my whole application surrounded my physics research essentially. So it was definitely like a major influence on my application and admissions for sure. And it's definitely common for people to start later. Like myself, I started junior year, and that's like I would say like pretty normal. I'd say that people just start in the second half of high school because the first half is a lot just for like taking the classes and getting the prerequisite knowledge. Like especially like coming in, like in ninth grade, especially you don't really know that much, so it's kind of hard to do research anyway, since you don't have the knowledge exactly. But yeah, it's definitely like fine to start later. Okay, while seeking research topics, how does one ensure the originality of such topics? A lot of it, since especially you're in high school, you're not like a full like researcher. Like you don't even really have that much experience in research. A lot of the time you just have to rely on like your mentor, for example, to help guide you to a topic that you're able to do and something that's like original and interesting. So like it's really you don't have to rely on yourself to come up with the entire topic. Like you can get some guidance from your mentor and from there you can either like adjust it or like try to do something like based on what they said. So you don't really have to come up with your own like idea straight away. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Is it possible for ninth graders to start research? I mean, it's definitely possible. Like just depending on what your background is, what you're interested in, like even if you really don't have that much background knowledge, you can definitely start doing research if you know like what you're interested in. You can just look up papers yourself, watch like YouTube videos or something about the topic and just learn more about it until you like have something in mind. Okay, how was the topic or subject chosen? If you're talking about my own research project, me and my mentor were kind of thinking like because at the time COVID-19 was such like it was just like around like everywhere. Like it was just like the only thing people were talking about. So we were just thinking like how can we combine quantum physics with like COVID-19 because it was such a hot like it was such a relevant thing at the time. So that's kind of how my that idea came about. Which institutes provide more research opportunities for high schools and are they open only during summers? Um, so let me see. I think, for example, MIT does the program RSI. If you're familiar, research. I'm actually not sure what RSI stands for, but that's like a very prominent research program. They also do primes, which is specifically math research. Um, but those are only open during the summers, and I think RSI specifically is only open for people in that are in junior year. So if that's something you're interested in, you should probably like look it up and see like what the application requires and stuff like that. How did you get Stevens Institute help you with research? Yeah, like I like reached out to a professor and they said that I could work with them. Do you know how much rec letters and aspects of the STS application matter compared to the research report and project itself? Okay, I think the two most important parts are the research report and the recommendation letters. I'm not sure exactly how much the other stuff is comes into play because the other stuff is asking like what other activities do you do in school and stuff like that. So I feel like that stuff is not as relevant, but for recommendation letters, they tell like Regeneron basically like how much promise you show as a scientist and as a researcher, and that's something that they really look for. Like especially your mentor recommendation letter, like because they work with you like the most closely, so that's probably pretty important for STS like Regeneron to know like if you show a lot of promise in that regard. And then obviously the research report is the most important part. I didn't do any research summer programs in high school, so I really don't know that much about it, but it's something like you can just find online like more information about. What qualification do you need for MIT primes? Um, I don't know if there's an age requirement. Probably not. I think you just have to be a certain grade. And then research experience. Probably when you apply, uh, I'm not exactly sure what the MIT Primes application is since I never applied for that. But for example, for RSI, I think on their application, it's better if you do have research experience. So I'm not sure if MIT Primes has the same like attitude about research experience, but that's something you could probably find online. And I'm pretty sure you can use MIT Prime's research for research competitions. Like you can keep in touch with your mentor and keep working with them after Primes is over and then use that to apply for competitions. I think I know people that do that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, does anyone else have any questions? Okay. If there's not, then again, my email is here, so you can just send me an email whenever you want. And then also like if you need access to certain slides, I can share those, but you have to send me an email because I can't do it right now. So yeah, yeah, no problem. I guess like if anyone else has any other questions, I'll stay for like until 9 and then I'll log out. Okay, how important is lab experiments in research award evaluation? Like if you're talking about being in a lab itself and doing experiments, I mean like they don't exactly say like if you're doing a lab experiment, you're more likely to get an award. Like it really depends more on like what results you have. Like are your results interesting, innovative, new? It's less about like doing an experiment than getting a result from it, if you know what I'm saying. Like you don't have to do be in a lab to win a research award. Like my projects were both not lab experiment projects. So it's fine if you don't have that. Um, I'm not going to be leading research projects for high schoolers since I am only an undergrad student and I don't have professional experience in that. But if anybody needs any advice in terms of doing research in high school or like applying for these competitions, like I'm definitely happy to help with that. But I'm not going to be personally leading any projects. Can you just do modeling or do you have to have real data? You definitely don't need to be doing stuff with real data, like in the sense like you don't need like a data set. Like for example, my first project was about looking at COVID-19 patient data sets, but it's not like you have to do something about that specifically. Like you don't need to be analyzing a data set. Like you also just be doing modeling, kind of things like that. How many hours do you have to contribute to work on topics daily or weekly? when subject topic is chosen with mentor? Um, I would say like it's good to try to work on the project like basically every day. It doesn't even have to be like many hours a day. It's just always good to like make some progress every day so you don't feel like you're like lagging behind or like getting lazy with it. Like maybe like I don't, it really depends like on how productive you are. Like it's really hard to put a number of hours to it. The best thing I can say is just try to work on it like every day, basically. Do you have to have a mentor for ISEF or TJ? Oh, wait, TNJ, um, TNJSF. I think you don't need to have a mentor. But if you don't have like a research mentor, I remember on the forums you need someone to sign off on the forums. So you would have to reach out to like a teacher or something. So I think like technically you need to have a mentor, but they might not be like that involved in your project. You just need to have like an adult mentor on the project, but they don't need to be like exactly working on it with you. Okay. How to find mentors. Okay, so basically, uh, like I said, either you can participate in one of those kinds of like research programs that are already out, like available, such as like MIT RSI, MIT Prime, like those kinds of things, because they connect you with a mentor, and then you can do like that. Or you can also send emails to like people at universities. They don't even have to be close to you, but it could just be like any university that they have a professor that you're interested in working with them. And also, like, make sure you're not limiting yourself. Like, don't just email people from like the top universities or the most famous people. Like, it's good to like widen the people that you email because like chances are the people at the top schools or like the top people in the field will not like email you back. So you also have to be kind of realistic when you're sending emails. Um, but that's basically how most people find mentors. They'll just like email a lot of people until someone like agrees. Or like if, for example, your school has like an established program with a university, maybe you could find a mentor that way, something like that. Hey, thanks for listening to the seminar. Yeah. I hope this was informative for you guys. And I hope all of you guys end up doing research in high school. It's a very great experience and you learn a lot from it. Okay, so yeah, unfortunately the recording will not be provided. But if there's like a slide or some slides in particular that you want to see, reach out. Or if you have any questions, that maybe I said earlier, but you didn't get to hear it, you can also just email me and I'll get back to you. Okay, thanks for joining, guys. I'm gonna log off the Zoom now. But yeah, just send me an email if you have a question.